Do you ever feel violent?
Yes, I do.
What do you feel like doing?
Killing people.
You still feel like killing people?
Yes.
Describe the feeling that you get when you feel like killing people.
Well, last March 11th, I was hallucinating, and I took a razor blade and I cut a man's throat.
Here in the hospital?
Here in the hospital.
Do you think you'd murder me, Joe?
Yes.
That's gruesome, Joe. That's horrible.
Yes, it is.
And you don't blame me if I say I hope you never get out of this place.
I hope I never do either.
Okay, so I looked into this guy's history, and his parents abandoned him when he was young, and then when he got adopted by his foster parents, they abused him. So basically, he went through a lot of trauma.
People are calling this case the Incest House of Horrors. This case comes with just about the biggest trigger warning for the most horrific things you could hear. It was October 2023 in the quiet Polish village called Koniki. An arrest was about to happen which would shake the small community. The true horrors of what had been going on under everyone's noses were absolutely chilling. Piotr Girasik was 54 years old. He and his wife Hannah had had a staggering 12 children together. Hannah had passed away 15 years prior, leaving Piotr to look after the children on his own. Now, the house that he lived in was far from ideal for such a huge family. Locals were also often concerned about hearing cries and screaming from inside the home. They knew Piotr had a close relationship with his 20-year-old daughter, Paulina, but they had no idea just how disturbing things were getting inside the home. That was until local workers at a cake shop nearby tipped off social services. They had serious concerns about what was going on in the property, and they were right to be worried. When officers arrived at the home, they could smell something absolutely potent. Upon closer inspection of the property, they found decomposing dead babies in the basement. 2 of the tiny bodies were wrapped in plastic bags and one was just lying on the floor. Now, at the time of the discovery, Piotr wasn't actually living in this house with all 12 of his children. Some had escaped. He was living in the house with his daughter Paulina and his disabled son Damien. It would later be revealed that sometimes Damien was seen sat outside the house crying. He told officers that his dad would have S with his sister, so the dad's daughter, and regularly chase Damien out the house and beat him when he wanted to do this. Damien was abused and was given little more than cold rice to live off. Horrifically, police discovered that the deceased babies in the basement were actually the product of incest. The 3 babies found in the cellar were believed to have been killed just after they were born. Frustratingly, Piotr had actually been on the radar of police. He'd been investigated 5 times over allegations of incest. He was arrested finally by police, and his daughter Paulina was also arrested. Thankfully, many of Piotr's children had managed to flee, and his one daughter, Kasia, referred to him as a monster. He's now facing charges of murder, incest, and R.
That wasn't a father. That was a true monster.
He was 14 years old when he took the life of his 10-year-old cousin. The case of Lily Peters has got to be one of the most horrific cases I have ever read about. She was just 10 years old when her life was taken by her 14-year-old cousin, Carson Peters Berger. A little bit about Lily: she lived with her dad in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. Her parents had split up a few years prior. Her mom moved away, and so Lily stayed with her dad. On April 24, 2022, Lily rode her bike a very short distance to go visit her aunt, Lori Davis. By 9 p.m., Lily had not returned home, so her dad calls Lily's aunt, asks if she's still over there. Lori says no, and her dad makes the decision to call 911 and report her missing. Shortly after reporting Lily missing, her dad wasted no time and started his own search. He found her bike about a half mile from their house near a walking trail that Lily was known to ride her bike. Police quickly joined in on the search, but unfortunately it got dark fast and they were unable to locate Lily that night. Searches started back up in the morning, and around 9 a.m. a volunteer that was helping out with the searches found the body of 10-year-old Lily Peters near the walking trail that was very close to where her bike was found. When Lily was found, she was nude from the waist down, and it was very clear that she had suffered some kind of blunt force trauma to her head. When Lily's body was sent off to the medical examiner, they also discovered that Lily had been brutally attacked and SA'd. They found evidence of strangulation as well as DNA on her body that confirmed she had been SA'd. When police started their investigation, they first decided to question Lily's dad and asked him what Lily had been doing that night, who she was supposed to to be with, and her dad told them that she was supposed to go see her aunt and come home right after. Police go to speak with Lily's aunt, Lori Davis, and her 14-year-old son, Carson Peters Berger, who was Lily's cousin. An investigator spoke with Carson. He admitted to being with Lily that night. He told them that after Lily came over, the two left the home to explore the walking trail that was nearby. They soon got to this walking trail. Lily was riding her bike and Carson was riding his hoverboard. He then asked Lily if she wanted to explore off the trail, and so the two started walking into the woods and up a hill. They reached the top of the hill. Carson punched Lily in the stomach, knocking her to the ground. He picks up a large stick and starts hitting her over the head with it. He then gets on top of Lily, starts strangling her until he believes she is no longer alive. After he attempted to SA her, and then out of fear of being caught, he got up, left Lily where she was, and returned home. When Carson got home, he immediately took a shower and threw his clothes in the laundry. A few hours after he took Lily's life, he heard that Lily's dad, his uncle, was looking for her. He knew that people were going to start looking for Lily, and so he decided to return back to the crime scene, drag her body a few feet out of the way, cover her up with leaves in hopes of hiding her body. After investigators heard this entire confession, Carson was arrested and charged with the death of his 10-year-old cousin. Of course, everyone was so mortified about this situation and was questioning how a 14-year-old boy could even think about doing this to his 10-year-old cousin, let alone anyone. And that is when they found that Carson's background was very troubling. When Carson was 2 years old, his mom, Lori Davis, and his dad, Adam Berger, split up. Carson ended up living with his mom, Lori, half the time, and the other half of the time he lived with Adam. Now, Adam was not a good guy. He was a child predator. In fact, in 2016, Adam was caught with explicit photos of children on his phone. He literally kept these images in organized folders categorized by the different types of abuse material. Adam was charged with having these photos, and he eventually posted bail. While he was out on bail, he was not allowed to see Carson, who was 8 years old at the time, but that did not stop him. Lori reported on multiple occasions that Carson was seen riding around in Adam's car. She also described another violent incident that took place between her and Adam in 2017. One night, Adam tried to take Carson, and he hit Lori with his car when she tried to stop him. Finally, in May of 2018, Adam was sent to jail for the images on his phone, and he only served a 3-year sentence before being released in 2021. By all accounts, Adam was not allowed to have contact with Carson after his release, but he maintained that he never committed any offenses against children despite these images being found on his phone. He said that none of the victims were his son, and that because of this, he should be allowed to see his son, but obviously that was denied, and it wouldn't matter anyway, because a few years after he was sent to jail for having these images on his phone, his son was arrested for the murder and SA of his 10-year-old cousin. January of 2024, it was determined that Carson would be tried as an adult, and as of now, prosecutors say they are aiming for a trial date for April 2025. This case is absolutely horrific. The fact that a 14-year-old child could even come up with this type of crime and then commit it against his own 10-year-old cousin. Lily Peters was a beautiful, bright, bubbly little girl who loved the color purple. By all accounts, this town that she lived in, Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, they hung up a bunch of purple everywhere. People were leaving purple lights on their porch to remember Lily. Let me know what you guys think about this case down in the comments.
I mean, at first I was thinking the same. How could a 14-year-old child possibly think of committing such crimes? But again, it was the trauma that he got in at such a young age.
This is what happened to 32-year-old mother of one, Carmen Thomas, whose case is one of the worst I've ever heard of in New Zealand. Carmen Thomas lived in the Auckland suburb of Remuera, and she was reported missing on the 13th of July 2010 when she failed to pick up her son. Soon after her disappearance, Carmen's car was found abandoned in Hamilton, which is about an hour and 20-minute drive from Auckland. Her bank accounts were untouched, and the last known sighting of her was on some grainy CCTV footage from June the 27th, which was a couple of weeks prior to her disappearance at Countdown in Green Lane. Carmen had been reported missing by her ex-partner, Brad Callahan. They shared custody of their son, Jack, who was 5 years old at the time. They'd met in England, but separated shortly after Jack's birth, and it said that the pair parented amicably and everything was going smoothly. A massive investigation ensued, and police searched everywhere that they could think that she might have gone, but A month into the search, there was still no sign of Carmen. And at this stage, police decided to fly her mother to New Zealand from South Africa in order to make a plea to the public in the hopes that that might lead to some sort of break in the case. And then the police made a shocking announcement. They said that they now believed Carmen to be dead based on the amount of blood found in her abandoned vehicle in Hamilton. This is also when police completely shut down on the media. Up until this stage, they'd been very open and providing constant flow of information to the media and the public, but now they were entirely tight-lipped. However, a local newspaper, the New Zealand Herald, somehow managed to gather some intel on the operation. Intel that suggested that Carmen's partner, Brad, the one who had reported her missing, was now the police's sole suspect in the case. Police had found a witness of sorts, a friend of Callahan's who had provided information and evidence to the police in order to obtain immunity from prosecution. And the story that this man told police was damning. It detailed how Brad had reached out multiple times for help in disposing of Carmen's remains. Oddly, the friend never went to the police. Like, during the process, he said he refused to take part, but he didn't take any further action and actually continued to hang out with Brad after the fact, after he'd reached out to him. However, police later ascertained what they believed to be what happened the day that Carmen was killed by Brad. The story goes, and again, we only have one side of the story because poor Carmen is not here to defend herself or share her version of events. But it's said that on the evening of June 28, Carmen contacted Brad saying that she had some concerns about their son Jack. So the following morning, he went over to her house in Remuera at around 8:45. Now, exactly what transpired at this stage, we will probably never know. However, police speculate that Carmen, perhaps following a fight with Brad or, I don't know, told Brad that he was not Jack's biological father. This sent Brad into a blind rage, and he beat Carmen so severely that she died. A neighbor next door reported hearing screams and cries, and she actually went outside to check up on Carmen, and she said she witnessed Brad coming out of Carmen's house with blood on his clothes, but he just told her that Carmen was real sick and had been vomiting up blood, and he told the woman that she could come in and check on Carmen if she wanted to, but she decided, oh, she's obviously really unwell, so I'll leave her to it, and went back inside her house, which I find personally really scary because what was Brad's plan if the neighbor did decide to go in and check up on Carmen? Was he going to kill her too? Anyway, the neighbor then sent a text message to Carmen just saying, oh, I hope you're okay, and then got a reply from Carmen's phone saying that she was feeling really sick, but she was going to be okay and she was going down the line or leaving town for a wee while. Turns out that the person using Carmen's phone the entire time was Brad, and he was sending text messages to her friends and family and boss, pretending to be her so that they wouldn't be suspicious. But of course they were, because everybody who knew Carmen knew that she would never, ever, 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 ever abandon her son like that. Anyway, despite having Brad in custody and having the testimony from Brad's friends, the police still hadn't found Carmen's body. But then they made a hurried press conference announcement to say that they had located her in an area of bush in the Waitakere Ranges. And the details of the disposal of Carmen's remains are truly some of the worst I've ever heard, so I won't go into it. However, all I'll say is that he had dismembered her and placed her into various buckets filled with concrete. And remarkably, investigators were able to find her, thank goodness, so her family could hold a proper send-off. Brad was sentenced to life with a minimum non-parole period of 13 years and 8 months for murder and attempting to pervert the course of justice. Now, just to clarify for our non-New Zealand viewers, life does mean life in our justice system, and the minimum non-parole period, even if you get out on parole, you'll be on parole for the rest of your life, so you're never truly free. That being said, we are kind of famously lenient with our sentences here compared to the likes of the US, where he'd probably be in jail for the rest of his natural life. The one arguably good thing Brad did after his incarceration was he managed through the courts to get name suppression for their son Jack, and made it so details of his whereabouts, his location, his new name, his family, anything could never ever be revealed or reported on by the media. So that's one thing. Another insane thing is that at this time that Brad murdered Carmen, he had another partner who was pregnant, who stood by him even when it became apparent and he admitted to having killed Carmen. She stuck by him, which is insane. She had their son 2 weeks after his arrest. So now Callahan has 2 kids who are going to grow up without parents, one who is essentially orphaned. So yeah, what a great guy.
This is the youngest woman in America to ever be put on death row. Krista Pike. Wow, where do I even start? Krista was born with severe brain damage because her mother was drinking pretty heavily throughout her entire pregnancy, and Krista had a terrible childhood. I'm not even gonna lie. Her parents were neglectful and abusive. Krista was often bounced around from mom's house, dad's house, grandparents' house, and they all sucked. By the time that Krista was 15 years old, she had been essayed by multiple men, and this abuse started as early as when Krista was 2 years old, and one of these men even included their dog in the essay of 12-year-old Krista. By the time that Krista was 18 years old, she was a high school dropout. She spent some time in juvie, but she said that she wanted to turn her life around, so she joined Job Corps. If you're not familiar with what this was a government-funded program where troubled teens and early adults could live on this campus all together. They would finish their education, learn skills, so hopefully one day they could have a great career. But only after a few days on campus, Krista met 17-year-old Daryl Shipp, and they started this relationship. It was extremely toxic. Daryl was really into a lot of really weird, dark, creepy things, and this toxic, abusive relationship that they had completely distracted them from what they went to Job Corps to do, which was better their lives. Krista also started this feud, you could say, with another girl on campus, 19-year-old Colleen Schlemmer. Colleen was at Job Corps for all the right reasons. She really did want to better her life and have a great career one day with computers. That was her dream. But Colleen was sucked into this petty teenage drama by Krista. Krista was convinced that Colleen wanted her man to Daryl and that Colleen was obsessed with her man. But if anyone in this case is obsessed with anyone, Krista was obsessed with Colleen. She was always talking about her, how much she hated her. She was pretty much stalking her around campus, threatening her and bullying her all the time. And then one day in January of 1999, Krista goes up to Colleen and asks if they want to call a truce, and asked her if she actually wanted to hang out that night, kind of like a peace offering. So that night, 18-year-old Krista, her boyfriend, 17-year-old Daryl, and their friend, 18-year-old Shadola Peterson, all lured 19-year-old Colleen off of campus, and then once they were alone in this creepy part of the woods that was like off of a park, Daryl and Crystal attacked Colleen while Shadola kind of stood back and was used as a lookout. This attack on Colleen lasted over 45 minutes and it was brutal. They were kicking her, beating her. They used a sharp weapon on her 300 times, and then they were dropping these big cement blocks on her until Colleen's skull was completely fractured. Krista even took a piece of the skull back to campus with her and was showing people and bragging to anyone that would listen about what she had just done. Krista has just unalived Colleen over jealousy over a boy, Daryl, that Krista had only known for 3 months. This was all over a 3-month-long relationship. And for some reason, all of these kids on campus that Krista is bragging to that she just unalived Colleen did not tell anyone until Colleen's body was found 2 days later. In police custody, all 3 of them were arrested, obviously, and they all made full confessions. And Krista was smiling the entire time, like she was totally pleased with herself. Since Shadola didn't actually have any physical involvement, technically, in the unaliving of Colleen, she walked away with only probation. To Daryl, who was only 17 years old at the time, was sentenced to life in prison with possibility of parole in 2026, which is not that long away, but personally, I don't think there's any chance that they will let him out. And Krista, who was only 18 years old when she unalived Colleen, tried to blame her actions on her bad childhood. We hear that all the time. She was sentenced to death row and was the youngest woman in America to ever be sentenced to death. And Krista, who to this day has never shown any emotion or remorse for Colleen and Colleen's family, cried. She cried a lot. She bawled her eyes out when she found out that she was going to be sentenced to death. Krista also said that she did not think that she deserved to die, but Colleen did. Because you were insecure about your 3-month-long relationship? Like, girl, please. And to only further prove how heartless Krista is, only a few days after she was sentenced, she sent to Daryl this letter. I'll put part of it on the screen now so you can pause and read it, but it's disgusting, and you will see. There is not an official date set to unalive Krista, but there's been a lot of talk recently to actually set a date since this happened all the way back in 1995. So if you want updates on that, you can always follow me. I'm constantly updating on the cases that we cover. There has been some controversy. Some people believe that Krista at 18 years old was too young for her sentence, also considering that Daryl was 17. So, you know, a year, actually only a few months younger than Krista. They received life in prison versus, you know, the death penalty. So why is 17 so different than 18? You can let me know what you think about that. Personally, I think that Krista is exactly where she should be. But that's completely my opinion, and I'm open to read all of your guys' opinions in the comments.